My name is Ellen Oakes. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters, Greater Chippewa Valley. And I want to welcome all of you who have come tonight to hear more about the process that we use to collect votes in this country and in this state. I'm excited to be able to present to you 4 clerks that will talk about it. I better look at my notes so I get things right. I want to thank all the collaborators who helped bring this event tonight together, not just in League, but people who have access to the machines that are used, people who could arrange to have this room for us. I want to thank the City of Menominee for allowing us to use this room tonight for our meeting place. I want to point out that if you don't already have a card like this, you might want to have one in case you think of a question that we forgot to ask, and we can ask that question towards the end of the meeting. So if you don't have a card already, you might want to pick one up back there. I hope you got your name on our list of attendees, and I hope you noticed there are refreshments, so that if you skip supper, you won't pass out here. I want to thank the Dunn County Clerk's Office for the demonstration of the equipment, and that's something that I couldn't have put together. You know, in this country, elections have been under pressure and a subject of controversy for the last 4 years, particularly. But actually, it does go back a long way beyond that. It's as old as our republic. There has always been a worry, will people's votes be one person, one vote, or will somebody figure out a way to scam the system? There are a lot of safeguards built into the way we do our voting, and we're going to hear about that tonight. I recently talked to an election doubter who said, elections have a million moving pieces. Of course it's going to be possible to corrupt some of them. Well, we've had 200 years to work on this problem, so there are a lot of safeguards. The Wisconsin system is local. There are 1,850 clerks in Wisconsin. That's a lot of people to corrupt all at once. And when you walk into your polling place, you meet those clerks, you see those people, the people who help, and you see them looking things up in the book and checking your identification and everything, but you don't see the whole process. So that's why we're here tonight. And now I want to introduce our panel. We have Dunn County Clerk Andrew Mersil, and we have Eau Claire County Clerk Sue McDonald, and we have Polk County Clerk Shavana Lundeen, and we have the Springbrook Township Clerk Mary Strand. Now, Mary may seem like the odd person out, but she has a different kind of experience than the county clerks do, so you'll find that out too. I'm going to allow each of them to speak a couple of minutes about themselves, and then we'll go on to the questions.
Who wants to start, Sue?
All right, I'll start. Sue McDonald, Eau Claire County Clerk. I've been the county clerk for almost 4 years now. Prior to being the actual county clerk, I was the chief deputy for 8 years prior to that. So I've been in the office for 12 years. Lots of elections I've gone through in that time. I added it up sometime, 90 or so. I really enjoy what I do, and I enjoy, as far as the whole election process, and I'm happy to be here tonight to explain any questions, and we'll answer any questions, explain anything that you're confused about or want information about. Yeah, that's what it is. So.
I'm Shavana Lundeen. I'm the Polk County Clerk. I've been working with elections in the County Clerk's office for going on 5 years, so 4 full years. And then I took over as the official clerk a little over a year ago. This is going to be my 15th election. It's definitely not 90, but it's definitely not my first one either, including the 2020 election cycle that we all love. I've sat down with a couple of people that had questions about elections or questioned how elections were ran, and I'm pretty sure everybody's left pretty satisfied with once I go over the entire process, start to finish, and how diligent we are in the clerk's office and at the municipal level to make sure that everybody's voices are heard and everybody's votes are counted.
I'm Mary Strand. I'm clerk for Town of Springbrook, township here in Dunn County. I'm an elected clerk for a 2-year term, and I've been clerk for 19 years. I started when the previous clerk retired. Everything was done on paper and pencil, so we came into technology just in time with the machines.
And I'm Andrew Mersil. I have the honor and privilege of being your Dunn County clerk here in beautiful western Wisconsin. And I just want to say thank you to League of Women Voters Greater Chippewa Valley chapter, because putting this on is, I think, so important, so that people can learn more about the process, because there have been lots of questions that have been raised, and there aren't always clear answers from certain people. So who better to go to than the people who run the elections? And I just want to say thank you to not only Mary for being our municipal clerk level and offering her perspective, but also to Kate Martin, who's our City of Menominee clerk, who's here tonight helping us run technology, as well as Cheryl Miller, who's the clerk from the town of Red Cedar. I take a lot of pride in the fact that our municipal clerks, all 30 of them here in Dunn County, we have a great working relationship. We work really closely together, we train together, we are constantly working to make sure that everyone has as much information as they can about all the new rules and regulations. So I'm really thrilled that our municipal clerks have some representation here, and then also my compatriots at the county level, right? We have 1,850 municipal clerks in Wisconsin, but 72 different county clerks. And we're just so fortunate that we have such dedicated county clerks that want to make sure that we're all supporting each other, lifting each other up, helping each other, and bouncing ideas off of each other. You know, when some person comes up with a better spreadsheet to use, we're all sharing that information. And I think that's really important. And so a healthy and active clerks working group is just so integral to this election process. So I'm thrilled to be here with the 3 of you as well as the other municipal clerks here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for your service, all of you. So I'm going to begin with the questions. Yes. I don't think I missed anything else. The first question I'm going to ask, and they told me that they know who's going to answer what question, so I'm not in charge of that part. How many times are the votes in an election counted? How is this done? And by whom?
So I've kind of been assigned the first few questions here regarding this, and I did change that wording to how many times are the ballots counted, because that's kind of what you really had in mind. Ballots being what you're counting as far as by the different people. So technically, you know, the ballots are counted by the machine on election night, and then they're pulled out of the machine, and the municipal clerks have to go through them on election night. I don't know if you're familiar with inspector statements. You've heard what an inspector statement is, but here's an example. The inspector statements have to be filled out, the number of ballots, that number of voters, and number of ballots have to match on election night. So that's looked over by the municipal clerk. Then they're given to, the ballots then are given to the county clerk the day after the election. And we do a board of canvass, which we review all of the totals. It's generally the Monday after the election. So we go through a board of canvass process, which I will pull up. Sorry, this is so many different things to bring out here, so I'll show you April. Our board of canvass, kind of what we do, we bring up. Here's an example of the total sheets. So here's an example of these are the totals that came to us on election night. So these are what are recorded and transmitted to the county on election night as far as what they were. So then we go and we compare with the totals tapes that come out of machines, make sure that the board of canvass consists of myself and a Republican and a Democrat. We sit and we look through every list of totals, every totals tape, and we make sure that everything matches, so that what actually came out of the tape is what we reported on election night. So we're looking through those again. And if we don't match, then we have to have a reason why they don't match. So I've got we have to do minutes that state why every single discrepancy, why it was. So here's an example of our minutes from April, where we went through and the number of voters on the inspector statement and the number of ballots cast. So once in a while, you come in a little bit off, or we have registered write-ins, we have to add those in, so we're adding. But the main thing that happens is basically human error. The city of Eau Claire here, American Legion polling place, here they have 3 wards. So in this case, we had 207 voters for Ward 42, 209 ballots. We had to determine why is there a discrepancy. It's because when they handed out the ticket numbers for the voters, they used number 152 twice and 160 twice. So there really were 209 voters and 209 ballots. And then the same thing with Ward 52, here they had this all described in their inspector statement. What happened was a voter came in, didn't realize it was after 8 o'clock, they gave him a ballot. He was given a voter number, but not allowed to put that ballot through the machine because they realized it was after 8 o'clock. So that's where you had 128 voters, 127 ballots cast, so there's only 127. And again, it comes down to, so every single discrepancy is looked at and has to be explained. So we are reviewing, so there's multiple checks and balances here as far as the totals on the tape and what was reported, and then going through and just looking at everything that happened on election night from the inspector statements. These inspector statements, I've got another example here. This one's kind of a good one here. The inspector statements are very important. This tells what happened on election night, the machines that are used, the total number of voters, how many EDRs, election day registrations, number of absentee voters. All of these have to match. And then they have a list of who worked, and then everything that happened on election day. Some of these aren't very, not a lot happens here in the town of Brunswick. I've got City of Eau Claire. Sometimes they've got like 4 pages of things that happen because they've got so many more people and wards. So we rely on these to basically explain, what happened on election day and why something might be off. So the rest of the questions, I guess that's it pretty much for question 1. Our second question there was, do you want to read them, Ellen, or do you want me to read them, or?
Yeah, there is a second question that's related to the first.
So,
Are there different ways to tabulate the votes?
which is best. Again, there's the machine, and then, there's got a lot of information about hand counting, and people are got a lot of people who might push for a hand count. One of the other things as far as counting the ballots is in fall of our even years, so during the governor's race and the presidential race, we have to do a machine audit. And so all those ballots have to be hand counted. So for an audit, I'll bring up some audit documents here just to give you an example. We take all the ballots out of the ballot bag and we put them in stacks of 25, and then 2 people are assigned to each stack. So you go through and you hand tally. Here's an example of a tally sheet. You hand tally what you're seeing on the ballots, and someone else does. So there's 2 sheets. So there's 2 people who are doing the same thing, and the sheets have to match. And then at the end, after you've done that all, there's a report here that we have to give. This is done by the Elections Commission, assigns us which wards we're doing, who we have to audit, which ones we have to audit. It's in November of 22, it was 10% of all of our ballots. We had to do, it was, I think, like 6 different polling places, 6 different wards that we had to do. This was the township of Brunswick again. We had to make sure that the equipment, this is what the tape said, this is what we came up with after adding together all those tally sheets, and that's the difference. So this is fine when it's a simple election. This upcoming August election, when you have 5 different parties and you have 7 different races and you have all these different combinations, hand tallying can just get very, very complicated very fast, and we're all human, you know, we were only assigned to do a couple different races on these hand tallies, and it's still, I mean, it took us to do these 6 wards, it took us like a day and a half. So, and this was a group of, how many of us were there here? Like 8 people. It took us a day and a half to do just these 6 wards, and this is a simple election. You come up with, and you know, here's an example of a ballot that could potentially, you know, really confuse if somebody had to hand tally this. You've got people who are, you know, voting in different parties, multiple candidates, and you've got to go through and you determine, you know, do any of these votes count? Do some of them count? You know, if they picked a party or not, maybe some of them would count. And so there's just a lot of things that people don't realize how complicated it would be to hand tally. And this is just one side of this ballot. You know, there's 5 parties that we'd have to look at and have to figure out, you know, do these count? Is it vote for 1? Is it vote for 2? If it's a vote for more than 2, and there's only 1 candidate, do you count the write-in? And there's a lot of rules and a lot of complications, so that's just one other thing about hand tallying that people perhaps don't realize as far as that goes, so. And then, the next question was, are the vote tabulating machines tested? The answer is yes, yes they are. They are tested extensively. And at this time, I think we're going to go over to the back and kind of show you how they're tested. We, in Eau Claire County, I do the programming for all the machines. So basically, I set it up, I designed the ballot layout, I program in all the names, make sure that all the proper names, all the races, that all of the layout is proper, the wording, and then, you know, we send the ballots to the printer. When we get the ballots back, then they're given to the clerks to do a public test. So public tests done by the clerks. They take the ballots that we printed, they fill them out, and do kind of a very thorough combination of all the candidates, all the races, to fill them out, and then they do a spreadsheet that basically says this is what the total should be. Run the ballots through the machine, spit out the tape, and make sure that what the machine says is what you thought it should say. So kind of you know, we all do it slightly different. Like for this August election, our test deck, we call it a test deck of ballots that will run through. It's like 42 different ballots with different combinations. And so, you know, we run that through and make sure that the totals match. And if they don't, generally, you know, you got to go through and determine why not. And, you know, they should always match. Occasionally you get a situation where there's a write-in candidate where they don't fill in the circle. That's one of those situations where that's where the municipal clerks come in on election night. They're supposed to be looking at those ballots, and if they catch a write-in candidate that hasn't been marked and the machine didn't catch it as a write-in, they have to add that in manually themselves. So, but other than that, it's the equipment, you know, with situations like that ballot that I showed you before, the machine immediately knows what counts and what doesn't, whereas we would have to sit and study it. It's like, well, does this count, and this, you know, so again, I can't emphasize enough that the equipment is much more accurate than human, so.
Well, I think the other thing to note that's really important is that there's currently 3 different types of voting tabulators that are approved in the state of Wisconsin. And not only are they approved by the state level, they also have to be approved at the federal level, right? So even to be able to use a tabulator, it has to go through multiple approval processes. And then they are frequently tested. And the state of Wisconsin has a pretty vigorous way in which they say every few years, these people have to go, the companies are put through the ringer to be recertified. And it's a very extensive process, and they have to prove time and time again that yes, the machines tabulate everything correctly and everything happens that way. Something else?
Yeah, so it asks also if any of this is open to the public, and pretty much all of this process is open to the public. Every municipality does a public test beforehand. It has to be noticed. Anybody from the public can go in and verify that the machines are programmed correctly, that the results are matching, all of that stuff. And then as well as the audits afterwards. There are some counties that do a voluntary audit, which means they choose to audit random municipalities throughout their county after every election and make sure that those are accurate as well. I also know of one county that recounted the entire 2022 governor's race, the top, I think it was 4 contests, and none of their machines had any issues during that entire recount. They did that just to prove to their constituents that everything was on the up and up and accurate.
I think the only other thing to mention about hand counting ballots, you have some very dedicated poll workers that sometimes are working 16, 17, 18 hours a day on election day from start to finish. I get a little punchy after about 15 hours. So can you imagine then having the expectation that we're going to sit down and hand count 18,562 ballots? It's just, the machines are proven to be effective and efficient, and they're tested vigorously, and they're the tool for us to be able to get the election results out on election night as quickly as possible to everyone, which is what people really want to know, especially in a big contested race like a presidential race this fall.
And as Sue mentioned also, I just lost it. There can be issues. Just because the machines, we rely on them, and as Andrew said, they're a tool. That doesn't mean that they are completely infallible. It is our job and the clerk's job to make sure that we understand and know the rules that are in place to make sure that we catch things like that. But they are consistent. They are programmed to have the current statutes in place. And I know all of us have done poll worker training and municipal clerk training, and there's always little, discrepancies that we try to make sure are mitigated every election. We try to do better every single election. I can't imagine taking that information and then also trying to make sure everybody's on the same page of what does and does not count, the overvotes, the undervotes, the crossover votes, when they count in an April election versus when they count in an August election, which can be different when it comes to write-ins. Teaching and making sure that everybody's on the same page with zero bias is a lot more complicated than having something that doesn't have an opinion already have that information programmed right in there. And then it's consistent, where it doesn't matter what voter is putting their ballot in, it's going to be counted the exact same and consistent across the board.
How does the public know? How does the public know when the machines are going to be tested?
They're always publicly noticed. So just like every time a municipal clerk publicly notices an upcoming board meeting, they do the same thing about the public tests that are happening. So it's always put either on their website, it's also sometimes published out in front of their town or municipal hall. There's a lot of information out there.
And it's usually put in the paper of record, as I understand.
Yeah.
But
Like here's an example.
our news situation isn't as good as it used to be.
Here's an example of our notice. It's published in the Leaf Telegram. It will be published on August 2nd, and also in the Just-in-Time. Real quick.
Yeah.
Something like that. It has to
Yeah.
be-
I was just going to say, in Dunn County, our ballots are programmed off-site, they're at Command Central. So when Andrew gets those ballots in, the main batch of ballots in with the media, like the cartridges that go in the machine, the town clerk does the first initial testing. It's called a pre-lat, so that we've got that first initial testing done before we go on to the public test.
So essentially, there's a test before the public test even to make sure that it's correct, just so that's clear, as well as the rest of the testing and then the actual election day as well.
Do you think there might be a chance down the road when the public could be notified in a different way? Because the newspaper of record in Dunn County is, I think, still the Dunn County News. And that's like 4 pages and not very many people take it. Could there be a different method of notifying the public?
Well, I just see that Sue does a entire Eau Claire County public testing notice. I'm sure I'm going to get some pressure to start doing that, which is absolutely fine. I mean, I'm happy to do this. We just would work and coordinate with the municipal clerks. But yes, whether it's a website and it gets pushed to everyone's websites, we can do social media updates about that as well, so people are aware of when the public tests are. But yeah, they are publicly noticed, and so if anyone ever has questions, the other thing that's really great is all of the municipal clerks are here not necessarily because of the money, because they aren't usually high-paying jobs. They're here because, just like we are, we're here because we care about the election process. We are here because we're dedicated to learning and knowing the process so that it can be as effective and efficient as possible. And so reach out to your municipal clerk. If you've got a question about when their public test is, feel free to call them up or send them an email. They'll be happy to let you know when that happens.
The test generally has to be within 10 days of the election. You have to do the public test. So
Yes.
it's going to be sometime during the 10 days prior to the election. So you kind of get a general idea when like as ours, most of them do it all the same day unless some of them work and maybe have a different schedule. So.
Okay, we're going to move on to talk about absentee ballots. Of course, that's been talked about a lot in the last 4 years too. How can you be sure an absentee ballot is legitimate? Wouldn't they be easy to counterfeit? Who's answering this?
I'm going to answer this question. So the absentee ballot process is a very safe and secure process. Because the only person who ever is able to touch an absentee ballot and issue it to a voter are the clerks. In Dunn County, all of the ballots initially come to the county clerk's office. We verify that we've got the correct number, that we have all the municipalities that are tallied and accounted for, and that the ballots are accurate and ready to be sent out to the voters. From there, all of the municipal clerks come and pick up their absentee ballots. They have to sign out that they've picked up their ballots, so there's a chain of custody. From there, then the municipal clerks take them back, prep them, and are ready to send out. So oftentimes they will then maybe get some other town board members or League of Women Voters volunteers to come and help them prep the absentee ballots to get sent out. And then after the absentee ballots are sent out, it's charted and tracked. So the clerks keep a absentee ballot log, which sometimes they work in conjunction with their county clerk to get that updated. But all that information is updated in WISVO, which is our central election system. And so a voter can go on to myvote.wi.gov and request an absentee ballot. You do that online. All you have to do is make sure that if you are a registered voter, that you also upload a photo ID to prove that you are the voter that's requesting the absentee ballot. From there, once the absentee ballots are sent, oh thanks Sue, once the absentee ballots are sent, that information is logged in WISVO. So the voter can go onto MyVote and say, oh, your absentee ballot was mailed on this date. If they don't get it in a few days, it's a good opportunity to reach out to the clerk and say, hey, I saw that my ballot was mailed out, but I haven't received it yet. And then we usually say, well, that's because the entire Elkhorn post office quit, so let's see, right? Because that has happened before. But the second that the absentee ballot is returned to the clerks, that information is also logged. So it's really the only opportunity is one person, one vote, one ballot, right? So we really make sure that we chart that process every single step of the way. And like I said, there's no way that a person can just get a ballot image and print off a bunch of ballots and mail them in, right? Because one, we also have certified absentee ballot envelopes that are specifically designed by the Wisconsin Election Commission to certify that the person who is the voter has witnessed that this person, yes, they are the person who voted, they're returning the absentee ballot. So there's multiple checks in the process. The other thing that is important to note is there are sample ballots that are oftentimes put on a county or municipal website. But you can't just print off a sample ballot and feed it into the machine. First of all, your poll workers would stop you, probably call the cops, because you can't just feed a bunch of ballots into the machine. In addition to the fact that the sample ballots are never they're a sample, they're what the ballot will look like, but they're not able to be replicated to actually be fed and read by the machine. So that's another security feature that we keep intact. So there's several different parts about absentee ballots, and we'll talk a little bit about drop boxes later, I think, but that's a really secure process. They're not easy to counterfeit. Our ballots are often, in Dunn County, our ballots are all printed off-site at a safe and secure printer, and they're printed with a specific kind of ink to be able to be read by the machine. So even if you tried to print off ballots and feed it into the machine would not recognize it, right? So there's many different steps. Here's a good example, thanks Sue. This is what the new absentee ballot envelopes look like. So you can see at the top there, the municipal clerk will put on a label, if you're a Badger Brook municipality, like
To that, when you do request a ballot on MyVote, it is not just get sent to the clerk and it's just accepted. The clerk does review the proof of ID, so a person's ID, to make sure that it is sufficient. It does have to meet requirements, it can't be blurry, it does have to be able to be read, and then the clerks are able to deny those if it doesn't make those requirements. So it's not just the system telling the clerks what to do and that this is okay. The clerks do have a hand in that process as well in reviewing that and then sending it on and sending the absentee ballot with their initials on that ballot.
Okay, if a voter requests an absentee ballot, fills it out, and then brings it in on election day to the polls, but decides to vote there, what happens to the absentee ballot?
Well, I'll help with that question. If that voter brings their ballot into the polls, but they want to vote a new ballot, they need to hang on to it and rip it up. Once they hand it off to a poll worker at the polls, it's a valid ballot. And we would mark that in the inspector statement, that they had ripped up the original ballot and they're getting a new one. We would register that in the Badger book, the poll book, showing that they're getting a second ballot that day. So the key is, if they want a new ballot, they need to rip that one up without giving it to one of the poll workers.
Right, so that you see them ripping it up.
Or just don't present it to anyone that's working.
The other nice part about that too is with the regular printed poll books as well as with the Badger book, if an absentee ballot has been returned and the poll workers go through the absentee ballots in the morning after the polls are open at 7 a.m., they will start processing those absentee ballots. And if a voter came in, because for federal elections, absentee ballots are sent out 45 days before the election, they might have forgotten that they filled out an absentee ballot, or something could have happened. But we'll have that documented. So if a voter came in and they said, oh, I'm Brenda, sorry Brenda, not to pick on you, but I'm Brenda, I want to vote. And we'll say, oh Brenda, you had an absentee ballot returned, do you remember? And then she'll say, oh yeah, that's right. So there's always that double check, right, to make sure that one person, one ballot.
In addition to that, anybody that's got an absentee ballot and even puts it in the mail to be returned, that is counted as a cast ballot. So if for some reason you got an absentee ballot, but you decided to try to put it through the mail the day before the election, and you come in and say, well, I mailed back my ballot, but it's not here. Unfortunately, that counts as a cast ballot, and you do not get to take another one. Same as if the polling places received those ballots, you can't just say, oh, I think I voted for the wrong person, I'm gonna come in and I wanna change it. Nope, that's not how that works. You'll get a second one. The one that they have is the one that's going to be counted. That's how that works. That is how the process goes, and you can't just request another one. It'd be no different than if I came in on election day, I voted, a few hours later I decided, oh, I'm not sure, I think I voted for the wrong one. Can you dig that out of the machine for me, because that's not the one I wanted to vote for. Once it's sent back or received by the clerk, that is essentially a counted ballot.
When are the absentee ballots counted and why only at that time?
So currently, state statutes dictate that all ballots must be tabulated on election day. There is some legislation in the works to have like the pre-election day tabulation of absentee ballots. And that's really mostly applicable for the very large municipalities in Wisconsin, right? These are places that have thousands and thousands of absentee ballots that are issued because they have hundreds of thousands of people that live in their municipality, right? For all the benefits that Western Wisconsin has, in addition to the beauty, we just don't have that many absentee ballots. So for us to be able to process them on election day is usually not that big of a problem. We always say in Dunn County the best practice is to do the absentee ballots at the beginning part of the day, so that if somebody came in, we would say, no, you had your absentee ballot returned, it's been tabulated. Sue has a good example up here. This is a paper poll book, but you can see for Anne Marie Clark, she had an absentee ballot returned, right? And that's what was logged in WISFO by either the county clerk or the municipal clerk. So that if Anne Marie came in, we can also see A9774 was the absentee ballot, and then she was 9,744 vote.
That's just the numbering system.
That's the numbering
The
system.
tickets that they had, me
Yeah.
under that 9,000.
Okay, so if she came in, we can say your absentee ballot was returned, you already have a voter number, you cannot be issued a ballot, right? So there's lots of different checks that happen that way.
Yeah, one of the first ones here I showed. First page.
The first page here, this one says absentee ballot issued. So if that didn't have a voter number next to it, the person came in and said, I was issued an absentee ballot, but I did not return it. And then they could get another ballot. But in this case, you see there's a voter number next to it, which means that it was returned. And so therefore, they came in here, and then the clerk would say, no, there's already been a ballot returned. So just depending on when the poll book's printed, it could be that the ballot was returned after the poll books are printed a few days before the election, so then the clerk's still logging the absentees that are returned after that. And so in this case, this is one that was likely returned after the poll book was printed, so that's why. But again, you can see, once it's got a voter number, that means that's it. It's not there, or you can't vote again.
So witnessing an absentee ballot, can you speak to that? There have been some concerns about that.
Yes. So all absentee ballots in the state of Wisconsin are required to have a witness. And the witness's duty, their basically oath is saying, I have watched Shabana put her absentee ballot in this absentee ballot envelope to be returned. She has signed it. I'm signing to say Shabana's the one that signed it. Here's my signature, here's my name, here's my address. And the reason that we do that is because if there were to ever be a question about an absentee ballot, the county clerks always end up with this information, right? So after the election, all of the election materials are returned for safe storage in the vaults of the county clerk, so that we could go back to this ballot and reference it if there was ever a question about it. And we do oftentimes get requests for that, right? So, and that's one of the things that we keep for election materials. We usually keep them for the federal election for 22 months after the election, right? So we are dictated on how long we have to keep those materials. So if there was ever to be a question that came up, there is a way to check and verify that information.
Some witnesses don't completely fill out what they're supposed to put on the outside of the envelope.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. So, Sue, sorry, you can go back to that one that you were just on. Yeah. So the state of Wisconsin has the state statutes that dictate all of the rules and regulations that we have to follow. If you look at the bottom of this witness address, it's going to say that the requirement is the number, the street name, and the city. That's because that's what state statutes dictate. You do not have to list a state or a zip code, because that's what the state statutes say. Now, if the legislature wants to make a change, that's up to them. Don't do it before November, which they won't. But, so that's the way to do it. Now, there is the option if absentee ballot is returned. So let's say Carol and Randy both have the last name, and Carol and Randy live at the same address, right? So Carol's address is somewhere magical on the south side of Eau Claire. And Randy's address is also similar to that. If he put, 1027 East Humboldt Avenue, but didn't put Eau Claire, well, East Humboldt Avenue is the same as Carol's address. The interpretation is they live together, we know that this is in Eau Claire, right? And that's also an address that we recognize in Eau Claire, so.
And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been some legislation, or some litigation back and forth on that, but it's it's up to the clerk's discretion to be able to do that.
On July 5th, 2024, on July 5th, 2024, the Wisconsin Supreme Court restored Dropbox access. What does that mean? Justice Ann Walsh Bradley, quote, said, "Clerks may lawfully use secure Dropboxes in their discretion," unquote.
So this is 100% up to the municipal clerks to decide now if they want to use a Dropbox or not. As we all know, Dropbox has really gained popularity in 2020 because of the climate of that time with COVID. People were afraid to go into clerks' offices and come in contact with other people. They were not using the mail because it was so slow. There was shutdowns everywhere. So keep in mind that this came in at a very rough time. And then afterwards was decided to be unlawful. Now it is completely up to the clerks on if they want to use a Dropbox or not. A big benefit is to at least in Polk County that I've noticed, is that our villages and cities a lot of the times have a utility box already. And as much as we tried to encourage people not to use them, putting signage, do not put your ballot on here, there's people that just bypass that and put it in there, and then they have to reach out to the person. It becomes a whole thing. So it is up to the clerks now to determine if they want to use that or not. And as we've already gone over the absentee process, it's not like people can just take any random ballots and just stick them in there. They have to have gotten that absentee ballot through the absentee process. It still has to have the initials. It still has to have all those things that are required, regardless of where they drop it, whether they drop it in the mail or drop it in the drop box, the process is going to be the same, which is why we say this is a safe process to use.
The other thing to note is there's some questions about, well, there's not a camera on that drop box. That's true. Oftentimes municipalities might not have the technological resources or the funds to be able to put a camera on a drop box. There's also not a camera on post office box, right? There's a post office box in Menominee, for example, that sits in the middle of the street for convenience for people to be able to use. There's no camera on that. That's only accessed by the U.S. Postal Service employees, just like how a drop box at a municipal level would only be able to be accessed by a city or municipal clerk. So it's a very similar process. It takes, for some people, it takes out the question of, I put my absentee ballot in the mail, did it get back on time? And this is a way for voters to make sure that, yep, I dropped it in the municipal clerk's drop box, they got it, it's marked in myvote.wi.gov. It's a safe and secure process.
Can you talk about in-person absentee voting? There's a different time frame for that. It's a little different.
There is. So state statutes dictate that in-person absentee voting can happen starting next Tuesday for the August 13th election. It's dictated by state statutes. And that's basically the option to say, the clerk will make themselves available so that if you wanted to come to the clerk's office, fill out an absentee ballot because you're worried that it's so close to the election and Sharon just booked her magical Alaskan cruise, very exciting. And she, because she won the cruise on The Price is Right, this is very exciting for you, Sharon. But so if that's the case, right, she can contact her municipal clerk. All of the in-person absentee ballot hours are posted in a public notice and with the contact information for the clerk. The other thing that's important to note is that there are 30 municipal clerks in Dunn County, and many of them are part-time clerks. So we list that contact information, and the clerks will usually make themselves available as they can to meet a voter. So if it's, I have to meet you after work, it's 6 o'clock, I'll meet you down at the town hall, that's something that the clerks work out to do. But it's an option, and then that way the clerk has initialed the ballot, they've handed it to the voter fills it out in person, they put it in their absentee ballot envelope, they can sign it, the clerk can witness it, and then the clerk has that. So it's another security feature if people want to feel like they're participating and everything can be monitored and tracked with their ballot, it's an option that's available.
And to be clear, those in-person absentee ballots, they do not get counted. They go with all the other absentee ballots in the secure. Well, they don't get counted right then and that day. They wait until election day to be counted. There's just some clarification that they're not getting fed through any machine. They're not being hand counted right at that time. They get processed with all the other absentee ballots on election day.
And these in-person absentee voting sessions still have to provide proof of ID, who they are. So it's just like election day, the same requirements follow through with absentee voting.
And that's a requirement. So even if Sharon showed up to vote at Kate Martin's office, even though Sharon and Kate know each other, Kate would still have to say, all right, you would like to do in-person absentee ballot, please present your ID to me. And then Sharon would have to show her ID, and then the process would be very similar to how it would be on election day.
And just a note with that, be patient with your town clerks. As Andrew said, a lot of them are part-time. They work full-time jobs outside of the clerk's office. A couple of mine are nurses. They're working long hours, so being very patient with their appointment times, being able to vote in-person absentee.
Okay, new topic. What is Badger Books? Not every county has it. Why not? What does it replace, and what advantage does it have over the previous system?
Badger Books are the greatest thing since sliced bread. No, Badger Books are an electronic poll book. So instead of a paper poll book that you are used to seeing when you go to the polls on election day, where you have to still present your ID, prove who you are, and then sign in. Badger books are a way in which a voter can be checked in through a secure process by scanning the back of their ID, for example. So then we can verify, this is that person, this is Sherry, she's here, she's got her ID, we scan the back of it, it pulls her up as a registered voter. We can verify that her ID isn't expired, she can sign in, she gets printed a ticket, she takes the ticket to get a ballot, bing, bang, boom, she can fill it out, and it's a very efficient process and secure process to be able to check voters in, as well as do same-day voter registration. When we look at a presidential election like we're going to have on November 5th, don't forget to vote, sometimes you are used to seeing really, really long lines, right, for voter check-in, because we're flipping through a poll book and we're trying to find, oh, it's M, oh, no, it was Nelson, not Nilsson, and it can just be a little tedious. With the Badger Book, it's a safe, secure system to be able to efficiently check in voters, as well as do voter registration. For example, in the city of Menominee, we get a lot of students, Stout students, who move every year, and so they have to re-register to vote. In addition to the fact that Kate Martin, our esteemed city clerk, will be doing several voter registration drives on campus this fall. The registration process is also a very efficient system with Badger Books, and I think we're actually going to do a demonstration of that so people can see. But that's basically what it is. It's an electronic poll book that replaces the paper poll book. They've been approved in the state of Wisconsin since 2016, so this is they have a long history of success, and not every county has a bunch of municipalities. Not everybody can be Dunn County, unfortunately. But the other thing is there can be a price barrier, right? So a Badger Book is around $2,500 for a Badger Book. In a municipality that's smaller, they usually say it's good for about one for every 800 voters. So it's really important if you've got a smaller municipality, you might only need one Badger Book. But for example, the city of Menominee has dozens of Badger Books at this point. Just to be able to make sure that we have enough machines available to check the voters in.
So I knew when we set this up that Sue McDonald from Eau Claire County, Eau Claire County has not gone to Badger Books yet. And I asked you about that earlier this evening. Would you tell the audience why Eau Claire County hasn't gone to that yet?
Again, like Andrew said, it's mainly a price thing. It's each with Andrew kind of assisted his clerks in getting the Badger Books, whereas in Eau Claire County, it'd be each municipal's responsibility to get that on their own. And we do have 3 municipalities that do have it. We have the town of Washington, the city of Altoona, and the town of Pleasant Valley. They all have it and are using it. The city of Eau Claire has been looking into it. However, they have 20 polling places in the city of Eau Claire, and each polling place would need anywhere from 4 to 8 of these Badger Books at $2,500 a piece. That quickly adds up to $300,000-$400,000. So that's the barrier there as far as depending on how many they need.
Doesn't the state of Wisconsin assist cities with things like this?
No, there's no assistance. It's an optional thing. So
There have been like election grants that are provided, and they've happened during the pandemic a lot, but they haven't been, you can't use them for purchasing of Badger Books. So in Dunn County, we had a couple of municipalities that led the way and purchased Badger Books very early on, not to mention any names, Red Cedar, but, and really kind of trailblazed. And then because we have such a great working relationship with the municipal clerks, they were able to see and hear about how effective and efficient and secure the Badger Books were. So as popularity grew, and my mother taught me the thrifty nature that I exist, we ended up having a little bit of budget money left over at the end of a year. And I said, if any municipality is interested in purchasing a Badger Book, we will pay for half the Badger Book. And that's how we got to 91% of the Dunn County population now uses Badger Book. It's the highest county in the state. We take a lot of pride in that because it's one of the ways that Dunn County continues to lead. But it's just one of those things, and once the municipal clerks use them, they've really enjoyed them. The poll workers really like them. We do extensive training on the Badger Books and how to use them, and they've become much more popular.
I want to ask the audience, do any of you remember how easy it was to vote in the spring if you voted in the spring? Did anybody see the Badger Books in operation? Mary? I may have not realized it because you're also talking to the people there.
Is this a good time to show a quick demonstration about a Badger book, Helen? Do you want to do that at the end?
I would just add one more thing about the Badger book. Say you've got a new person that just registered for your municipality, but they've never come to your town hall or village hall. Well, we have a lot of books with Elk Mound address, but so does the village of Elk Mound, and so does the town of Elk Mound. So if a voter happens to come to the wrong polling place, we can direct them to the right place. We want to help them out.
Badger Books helps you with that?
So especially if, in like the city of Menominee, if you are on the east side of the street, you're in one ward, and the west side of the street, you're in a different ward. Well, that can be confusing if you don't remember which side of the numbers the streets are on. So by scanning the back of a person's ID, if they're registered to vote, it will automatically redirect them and say, no, you need to go to Ward 6. It's over here at the Methodist Church, go over and you can vote there today. But also for the rural municipalities where they have some Elk Mound addresses, some Menominee addresses, people get confused on what a municipality is. They think, oh, I live in Menominee. Well, E4422 is not in the city of Menominee, right? So it's been a helpful tool that way to redirect voters, to make sure that they're voting in the right polling place too.
To that point, as a county that doesn't have Badger books, we have giant maps on the wall, just so you that's a lot of the method. We do have clerks that come in asking for updated maps that they can put at their polling place, so they can check streets and make sure that a person is voting in the correct place. There is a way, when we go to reconcile the election, if somebody did happen to vote in the wrong place, we are able to, of course, their ballot would still count. We are able to give them the correct information for the next election, but all of that happens after the fact rather than right there at the place like the Badger Books does.
We have new maps, you know.
Yes.
I think we'll go through these couple more questions, and then we'll have a demonstration book of the voting machine and of the Badger Books, because that was part of the promise.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, how can we trust that the Badger Books thing won't be hacked?
Sure, so just like the voting tabulators, the Badger Books are not hooked up to the internet. So just like how a municipal clerk or a county clerk would have to download a physical paper poll book from WisVote, we do a similar process to be able to access the Badger Book file, to be able to use on the Badger Book. For a person who's their own provider of WisVote information, all the county clerks are, but then several municipal clerks do that as well. But some municipal clerks lean on their county clerks to help them with that process. We have a 3-step authentication process. So it's password protected, it's biometric security protected. It's to make sure that only the people that are approved to use WisVote can access this information. So that's one of the security features. The other nice part is, like I said, just like a tabulator, they're never hooked up to the internet. All the information is stored on a USB drive that's plugged into the Badger Book that's only accessed by those clerks. The other nice part is, and Mary attested to this, not only do you get all of the registered voters for your municipality, you also get it for the entire state of Wisconsin. So if a voter has moved here from Milwaukee, excellent choice, and they were registered in Milwaukee, if you scan the back of their ID, it will say, you were registered in Milwaukee, is that correct? Yes, but now I live in exotic Springbrook. And I want to register to vote today, and here's my ID, and here's my utility bill, and bing, bang, boom, we can get them registered. So that's the other nice part about a Badger Book. If you've moved within the state of Wisconsin, it's quick and easy to adjust your voter registration information and process you to be able to give you a ballot in your new municipality on election day.
Well, I'm looking forward to watching this machine in action. Okay, who are the people who work at my polling place on election day? How are they selected and assigned? And what is an election observer? I'll give you the whole package.
Okay. Well, the election observer is a person or persons who want to observe the election day. They cannot be a candidate on that ballot, but they can be anyone else but a candidate. They do have to sign in, provide photo ID. They have to indicate who they are representing, like a political party, a candidate, or an organization. And their photo ID must match the address that they list on this observer form. A candidate can be at the polls when the votes are counted at the end of the polls closing, but they cannot be there throughout election day. Want to add something to that? Oh, okay. And they would wear observer badge kind of thing. People who are working at the polls are typically your neighbors or people from your community. They are set for a 2-year term. Clerks or the chair of the town or municipality may receive a list of poll workers from a political party. Those must be received by the end of November of odd numbered years. And then by December, those folks and any other additional people are slated to be the poll workers for the next 2-year cycle. The folks on the political party list are typically, they must be scheduled to work really first, and they must have training first before they work elections. If a municipality does not get one of these political lists of poll workers, they can use anyone from Dunn County or the county of their municipality. With the exception of chief inspectors, they must be from your municipality.
So I've read that a lot of clerks previous to COVID have during the past 4 years quit being clerks because of the problems that came up. Is that easing off? Is it becoming easier to get poll workers now again?
I mean, Mary could speak a little bit to that. There was definitely in 2021 and 2022, there was still some nervousness about the traditional poll workers coming back to work. But what's great about having such an active and involved municipal clerk group like we have here in Dunn County, as I'm sure Polk and Old Clare do, is that if anybody is short a poll worker, they can reach out to the other municipal clerks and say, hey, does anybody have anyone extra? Or that you weren't able to schedule. And they're able to help and assist each other that way. The other nice part is that we all do countywide poll worker training. So if somebody is interested in being a poll worker, but they've never been assigned, they can kind of be in a pool of poll workers that have been trained, that if need be, they can go and find a municipality that needs some assistance. So we have seen that change quite a bit from the pandemic to where we are today in 2024.
Do you all hear that?
I will say too, though, that the city of Eau Claire is still looking for poll workers. They need like 800 poll workers, so they still need them. And one of the things that they often have problems with is you have to have a balance of Republicans, Democrats, or unaffiliated. And sometimes it tends to lean one way or the other, and it's just there's nothing that the city can do if they don't have that party's people come in and want to be poll workers. So, but that's a big thing, is to try to get an even amount of people, depending on what party they are affiliated with. So
We're pretty close to the election, Sue, so, and you don't have, there aren't enough yet.
well, the August election, they're fine.
Oh.
You pretty much are able to know who lives in your municipality, who's working at your polls. If you've lived there for a while, it's pretty much the same poll workers most of the time. So that is the kind of nice part about a rural county, is that we really get to know who's working the polls, who are our friends and neighbors, and who are the voters. That's another kind of check that we just do on each other. Everybody still has to show their ID, but we can always make sure that we're looking out for one another.
So I don't know if we've collected any questions. Joan,
Haven't seen it yet. but-
has anybody got an additional question they would like to ask? This is the time when you could have written on the card, or you, yeah. I tell you what, let's go have a lesson on what these machines.
Hello, I would like to be a voter today.
Voter, yes. Could you please state your name and address?
Yes, my name is Andrew Versil. I live at an address I'm not going to have recorded, but I live there. Here's my ID.
Wonderful. Thank you
Yes.
very much. All right, and now we are going to scan your ID. Oh, and I see there you are. It's your magical address.
So
and-
by scanning the ID, it's able to pull up only me as the registered voter. So then that's how Kate can then check me in to be a voter.
And there are lots of prompts on the screen to help guide you through the process when people are checking in. So it literally verbatim tells you what to say to the voter, which is really nice. You can also update their name or their address on the screen when you get to that point. But if everything looks good, then you just select your voter and you move on.
It's going to ask what type of approved ID that the voter used, right? So in this case, sorry, you need to see that.
Yeah.
I use my Wisconsin issued driver's license, which is an approved form of ID.
But you could use your passport or Wisconsin state issued ID or a tribal ID, lots of different options. For Stout students with student college or university tech ID. Okay, so we've got your driver's license checked here. It is acceptable. That is you. Yes.
So what if your address has changed since you got your driver's license?
Yep, so if my address has changed since this driver's license has been issued, but I've registered to vote previously, you can still scan in your ID that has a previous address, but because you have proven in a previous election or to your clerk that you are able to be registered at that new address, you can still use your ID. The other nice part is, in Wisconsin, our IDs are typically good for 8 to 10 years. Some people move a lot of times in that 8 to 10 years, and they don't always get a new driver's license. But because the Badger books are linked to the Department of Motor Vehicles, which is how we also check registration after elections, if you update your address with the Department of Motor Vehicles and then re-register, as long as you're scanning your ID, it'll show your current registered address in the system.
So if your address isn't the right address, then if you show a utility bill or something at your new address to her,
Yeah.
then that would be a way of validating it. Okay.
Yep.
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 So it'll ask me then if the address is on the photo ID, was it acceptable, not acceptable? I accept it, and then I turn the screen around and I ask the voter to please sign.
So just like how we would normally sign in with a paper poll book, we can just do this. Some polling locations have stylus, but you can also just use your finger to sign in. Now the other thing that's important to note is that Wisconsin is not a signature verification state, right? So we don't go back and we verify the voter's signature to who it was, because the election workers on election day have already looked at your ID and you've proven who you are, right? You're a registered voter. I am who I am. This was a few pounds ago, but still, like, I should still look like that person, right? So you'd sign the poll book just like you would normally sign at a Badger book instead of a paper poll book. And then it prints out your ticket. And for like a spring election, it will tell you if sometimes municipalities, especially rural municipalities, might be in 4 school districts. So you have a different school district ballot. It will tell you exactly what type of ballot you're supposed to get. So it's another security feature of the Badger book to say, all right, you're supposed to get the blue ballot because you're going to the Maumee School District. The next voter is supposed to get the yellow ballot because they're in the Elk Mound School District, right? So it's helpful to make sure that we can do that as well. So that's just another step in the process. And now what I would normally do is, be the next person. I would take this to wherever the ballots are issued, and I would say, hello, I'm voter number 1. I need a Menominee Area School District ballot.
Let's see here. Okay, I have my yellow and blue ballots. I'm going to give you that ballot here, sir. And there we go.
Okay, and so then the voter would take their ballot into the ballot booth, and they would fill it out. I don't want to fill out this ballot. This one's been pre-filled out. It's fine. It's fine. So in the partisan primary, this is for the August election, you have to vote in a party, right? And so it will tell you which political party you want to choose, and then only the votes cast in that column, in that party, are the votes that are counted. If you don't fill out this part of the party and you try to vote in multiple races, the ballot will immediately be spit back at you and say, it doesn't work. You can only vote in one party, right? So that's the other nice part about a tabulator. It will automatically tell you that. So I filled this out, with several write-ins in this particular party, but that's my right. And so I'm going to feed it in the machine. And
Wait, you didn't talk about the back of the ballot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
In August, it's important because there are I really don't like this ballot. There are two races on the back of the ballot about the two constitutional amendments. And if you've got questions about that, you can certainly feel free to reach out to your clerks, or the League of Women Voters has a particular stance that they've taken on
We
now.
have a strong stance, and we have a lot of friends on that side of the stance, too.
Yes. So if you've got questions, make sure that filling out the top part of the front part of the ballot is really important, but also that back part of the ballot of the two constitutional amendments that are being proposed is important. So I take it to the ballot booth, I'd fill it out, I would come
I
and.
think this might be more suited
Is this
to your
better?
liking. Yeah.
This is more like smiking, because it voted for me. So, but you can see I've chosen a party, and then I voted, this ballot is only voted in that party. So I take it after the ballot box, and I would take it and I feed it into the machine. You can feed it in front, side, upside down, however it goes. But what's important is that, and this is the only way, only the clerks have these ballots because the barcodes are the way that the machine reads the ballot, right? Any sample ballots do not have these barcodes. So if you tried to print something out from home, it wouldn't even get close. In addition to the fact that this isn't just regular paper, right? It's not cardstock, it's not regular paper, it's a special type of security paper to make sure that it can be only used by this tabulator. So I would take it to the machine, I would put it in. You can see that the voter count was set to 0. It's reading the ballot. Bing! Ballot cast, right? Voter number 1. The other thing I want to mention, and Sue can show this as well, before we did any of that, the thing that the election inspectors always do at the beginning part of the election before the polls open at 7 is they print what's called a 0 tape. So this is to prove that the tabulator is set to absolutely no voters, there are no ballots that have been cast, the machine is set to 0, and that the voters that process and feed their ballots in the machine throughout the day will be counted. The election inspectors also frequently take our check-ins to say, all right, it's 10 o'clock, we've had 247 tickets issued and voters checked in, there's 247 ballots cast, that's all documented. So if we ever got to a point where, okay, it's 3 p.m. and we've got 448 ballots issued and 447 ballots in the machine, there's a discrepancy. What's happening? Oh, Myrtle's still in the ballot booth, right? So that's her ballot. So we're always double checking those features to make sure that all the ballots, one ballot, one voter, and they always match the count. So similar to that, these are some other pre-filled out ballots. So like a public test, right? Ballots would be filled out. People can come and observe the process with ballots that have been filled out. So this one, for example, has several different write-ins on the back, right? There are no registered write-ins for, thus far, for the August election. But if there were to be a registered write-in, all of the clerks would get that information. So if somebody from the ballot number 2, and then I get my I voted sticker, which are very popular. Clerks don't ever run out of those stickers. Man, woo! What's important to note about that is if there were to be a registered write-in candidate, right, for any office, then that's the part at the end of the night. If you didn't fill in, for example, this write-in oval and then write the name, if you didn't fill in the write-in oval, the machine won't count it. So that's why a double check at the end of the night is that the election inspectors and poll workers sift through all the ballots to see if anybody did write in a name but they didn't fill in the ballot. And that's how we would make an adjustment, right? So we want to make sure that every ballot is always counted. There's multiple eyes on it. There's multiple checks in the process. Did you have a question, Paul?
Registered, you say that write-in has to register. I can't go and vote for myself if I haven't been registered as a candidate.
You can certainly vote for yourself, but your vote will not be counted.
Okay.
In the fact that you're not a registered write-in candidate. If you're on the ballot, you obviously, and people vote for you, but if you have to be a registered write-in for the candidate, to have your vote counted. So
What's the deadline for that? There's a deadline.
Friday at noon before the election. So if any of you are interested in running for
County clerk?
county treasurer, you can certainly do that before the election. The deadline is always noon on the Friday before the election. So at that point, the county clerks always see if there's any approved registered write-ins, and then we notify those clerks of that information. A voter has the right to show up at a polling location and say, is there a list of registered write-in candidates? They're allowed to see that list, but they can't take that list with them into the polling booth. They just are able to only view the list, and they have to hand it back to the election inspectors. Yeah, good questions. So we fed 3 ballots into the machine, it counted 3 ballots, and then Sue's gonna do her demonstration, and we'll close this poll, and we'll show you how the ballots were tabulated. So take it away, Sue.
All right, so our equipment's similar. I also brought our express vote machine. This is the one that is ADA compliant. It has headphones for people who are visually impaired, can listen, and it will read the screens to you so that you can see. Up here, this is part of a spreadsheet. This is just my example. This is 10 test ballots that I filled out. I do a spreadsheet, say, ones or zeros, that's what I'm gonna mark. Anything that's a 1 or a 0 is what I mark here. The 0 part is, those are not gonna count because they're either a crossover or you voted for too many in a party. So basically I've got 10 ballots here filled out. The express vote's kind of nice because you can't overvote or cross vote on an express vote on this machine because it prompts you, it goes through each screen. With a regular partisan primary, you have to, it says pick a party, but if you don't do it, you can still vote on this paper ballot. And if you stay within your party, then it will count. The express vote machine makes you pick a party, so then it proceeds to only show you the screens for that party. So that's why for an election like this, encouraging people to use these ones that really assist them. And then what it does is it prints out a card, and it doesn't count anything. It just prints this out for you, and then when this goes into this machine is when it actually gets counted. So it prints out what you chose as far as your candidates so that you can review it before you actually put it in the machine. So I'll just stick these 10 ballots in. I kind of put on here as far as, number 1, I chose Democrat. I won't go over all of these, but just an example of I tried to do a good, kind of a good section of how people could vote or how they could make mistakes. In this case, Democratic, I filled in, and then I filled in a Democratic candidate, but then I also filled in a Republican candidate. So, we expect this ballot, it's going to go in the machine, and it's going to count it. It's going to count the ballot. One thing here. So that the ballot goes down into the box. In this case, it'll take this ballot, and we won't know, I guess, until the end that the way I'm expecting it to count is it's going to count one Democratic there. It's going to count her vote, but then, oops. I wonder if I scratched it when I did something. Well, that's not a good demonstration. The first thing I put in.
Well, you voted multiple parties, right?
So, no, but it said unreadable marks on the ballot. So, yeah. Oh, I know what I forgot to do. I forgot to lock this in place when I set it up. This is all the things you want to happen when you're doing a demonstration, right?
And again, this is meant for the demonstration part, but that's why we do the pre-lab test, the public test, and everything to make sure that everything's ready to go. The other nice part is, Sherry, do you happen to have your ID with you?
I get.
All right. I just want to show you the efficiencies of the Badger book while Sue's getting this squared away. We talked a little bit about the steps in the process, but I want to show you how quickly and efficiently you can do this. I'm using Sherry as an example because she lives in Ward 11 with me, so we can check her in on this Badger book. And again, this is a demonstration. None of this information will be uploaded. The other great feature that I really enjoy about a Badger book is on these green lanyards, green for Dunn County, the day after the election, when all the municipal clerks have to bring their election materials back to the county clerk for safe and secure storage, we check everything in, we make sure all the documents are filled out correctly. So that happens on Wednesday after the election. It's a very busy day. But then on Thursday, what we can start doing is actually uploading all this information from the Badger book to WisVote. And the example I give of why that's important and why I'm so proud that 91% of the population in Dunn County is covered under Badger books is because starting on Thursday, we can start uploading that voter information so voters can go in to myvote.wi.gov on the Thursday after the election and see, yes, you were checked in as a voter, yes, your ballot was cast, yes, it was counted. In a paper poll book situation, the municipal clerks or the county clerk would have to go through pages, sometimes of empty empty pages with no signatures to find who the voters were. And it's a manual process to check in click in each voter that voted in that election and how they voted, in person or an absentee. After the gubernatorial election in 2022, there were 18,464 voters in Dunn County. It took us 6 weeks to manually check in all the different voters to log their voter participation. That means that some of the voters weren't able to see their participation until before the December 25th holiday. That's a long time from an election. So the Badger Book is really helpful in that way too, because we can get the information uploaded so voters can see that their votes have been tabulated.
And that's one thing I was gonna say too, is the city of Eau Claire, they're considering, you know, that the cost is great, but they will save money on after-election activities, because they won't need somebody to sit there and do all that entry. And also, they don't need as many poll workers with a Badger Book, because right now, when you got the paper copy, you have 2 paper copies. So you need 2 poll workers to fill everything out, because everything has to be like double-checked, and you've got 2 copies of everything. So it cuts down on the number of poll workers you're gonna need on election day, and also the after-election work is so much, it's done. I mean, it's done on election day, whereas we've spent, you know, some of the bigger elections, we spend weeks putting in the voter participation, so, and the voter registrations.
And registration.
Yeah,
So let's show you just quickly how fast we can check in a voter. Hi,
Hello.
could you please state your name and address, Sherry?
Sherry Johnson, you want me to
Yeah,
get
that's
my
great,
all right.
All right, thank you. Can I see your ID? Thank you so much. I'm going to scan her ID in. There she is, Sherry Johnson. 1, I know her. 2, I know that she lives here. And 3, her ID matches. I'm going to select the voter, choose her Wisconsin driver's license. It is not expired, so it's an acceptable form of ID. Sherry, would you please sign in? Sherry, sign in. Oh, you're done. Done. It's an acceptable signature. That's how quickly we can do Badger.
But if she wasn't registered, and she came up.
If she wasn't registered, we'd have to go through each of the steps of that process, right? But what's really nice about that is, if we go back here, I can show you just very briefly, that we can actually do voter registration in a really quickly and efficient manner. So, let's just look up Kate Martin, for example. She's a good time. I know. Oh, you do? That's right. Oh, crap. Who is a good example?
Brenda.
Brenda.
Brenda
Harrison. So you can also look up a voter by their last name. So the Badger Books are only able to be scanned in with a Wisconsin issued ID or driver's license. But let's say Brenda came in with her passport. You can use that as an ID. Here she is. Brenda, you were previously registered at this address. I'm not going to mention in front of everybody, but you now moved to Ward 11. Excellent choice. But what you see is that we can redirect her. So if she showed up here and we say, no, your polling location is supposed to be at this spot. So the voter can take a photo of that and they can be redirected to their polling location. But in this case, we're going to update her address and start the voter registration process. And I'm going to be able to say, okay, she's using her bank statement. It's from Bremer. All right, just assuming. The document number that's assigned to that particular statement, right? And then it's going to show you how we have to work across each of the steps to do voter registration. Brenda Harrison, she's got here, her birth date is something unmentionable, so I won't tell you the year, but she is over 18. And then the nice part is with the Badger Book, you can see that if you put in the first 3 numbers of the address, it's only going to show you the addresses that are in that polling location, or for that particular ward. So 708, there's 2 708s. She lives at 24th Street. She doesn't live with me. And so we would be able to check that in. And then we'd ask her the questions. Brenda, are you a United States citizen?
Yes.
Are you 18 years of age?
Yes.
Have you been issued a Wisconsin driver's license?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Am I a felon?
That is the next question. Have you currently resided at this address more than 28 days?
Yes.
Are you a convicted felon?
No.
Are you otherwise disqualified from voting?
No.
All right, now I'm going to have you sign your voter registration form.
And I can scroll.
Yeah. Top line. So Okay,
I screwed up.
great. The top line where it says your name, Brenda.
I can't see it.
She doesn't have her glasses on. And would you click the I certify that your information is correct? Right up here, sorry. Excellent. So Brenda signed her voter registration form. I'm the election inspector. I'm going to sign it. And then we can continue. And now she's checked in as a voter. Come back. And I'm going to choose that Brenda used her passport. And I'm going to look at her passport. It's not expired. Now, she signed her voter registration form before. Now she's going to sign the poll book. So where it says your name, Brenda. Perfect. Now she's checked in. It's an acceptable signature. Right? Versus paper forms where we have to sit down and go through each of the lines and items. It works its way across the system. It's a really nice, efficient way. So I'm so thrilled that so many municipal clerks wanted to hop on the Badger Book train for efficiency.
So I got a question. So if you're doing a registration on My Vote or the paper form,
Yeah.
the voter gets a chance to review the information that they've entered,
Yes.
those eligibility forms. It looks like it doesn't, Badger Books does not give the voter.
It does.
It does.
I
It was
just breezed over
yeah,
through that.
okay.
Yeah,
Good.
yes,
Good
that was
to
the
know.
question. So, normally you would review your voter registration form to make sure everything's entered accurately. Brenda did have that option, I just sped through it to show you that. But, yes, it would show you all the information, her address, that she's not a felon, everything like that. The other nice part is that if Brenda did admit to being a felon,
She can run for president.
If Brenda did admit to being a felon, the Badger Book will stop you from being able to vote. Because it'll say, you admitted that you're a felon, that you cannot vote, right? You cannot be checked in for voting. The other nice part about a Badger Book is, in polling locations, they're always provided a list of ineligible voters, right? That information is always tracked through the WisVote system. And so if you scanned your ID and you were an ineligible voter, it would stop you right away and say, you are currently an ineligible voter, you are not able to vote today. So they won't be printed a ticket, they cannot vote for the ballot. So it's a nice security feature that way too. I'm sorry, Sue, go for it. Back to
Okay.
you.
All right, demo of, if you were to hand count these ballots, these are all the fields that you would have to fill in. Because I picked Democratic, and I picked one Democratic candidate, but I left all the rest blank. So those are all considered undervotes. So you have to tally not only the candidate, but then undervote category. And then I got to where I picked one Republican, and I filled it in, but that one's not gonna count, because I picked Democratic here. So when I put this one in, it accepted it, but it's only gonna count the Democratic candidate that I put in. Here's an example. This number 3 is a crossover vote where I picked 2 parties right here. So this is where the machine will tell me when I put in the ballot, please work, demo thing. So it tells me right here that an error type, I crossover voted here, and I also overvoted one contest. So then if I hit review the errors, it tells me for senator I picked 2 candidates. And then also I picked 2 candidates in the party thing. So it asks me then what do I want to do? I've got an option here. It tells me there's errors on my ballot. If I cast it, there's things that aren't going to count. So I can either return the ballot and redo it, or I can go ahead and cast the ballot. And then in this case, I'm just going to cast it, and it'll count what counts and what doesn't. So I'll go through the review next, and I'll just hit cast ballot, and it will take it, but it's warning me ahead of time that it's not going to count.
Right, and that's the voter's right. The voter gets 3 strikes.
Yep.
Right, you can fill out 3 different ballots, but if you do it inaccurately after the 3rd ballot, we have to cast that 3rd ballot. You can spoil 2 ballots, but you really only get 3 options. So that's the other part. So the tabulators are nice too, because like Sue demonstrated, it stopped and said, haha, you voted for 2 senators, you can only vote for 1 senator. And it gives that voter the option to have the ballot spit back out. They can fix it, we can spoil their first ballot, and then they can feed it into the machine to be tabulated.
And
Versus dropping it into just a regular box that has to be counted later, we don't know, and then that total contest is void for that voter.
And unfortunately, you get people who fill out absentee ballots incorrectly, and they don't have that option to return their ballot and redo it. The poll workers just have to cast it as it is. So oftentimes, unfortunately, they maybe have picked somebody and it's not going to count. Then here's an example of where I picked all Republicans, But I picked all the candidates, so these are overvotes, 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 but here there's only one candidate. So actually, these will not count, and these ones will count because there's only one candidate, so, you know, it's one of those. And then often forgetting there's a referendum questions on the back. Even if the entire ballot, you know, you messed up the whole partisan part of it, if you filled this out correctly, it's gonna count your 2 referendum questions, so that's one of those things, so, yeah, just see what this one tells me on here. What is one of these? And these ones go in the same way. So in this case, it tells me that I voted for 4 candidates for senator, 2 candidates for Congress, and 2 for assembly. So in this case, I can either return it or cast it. So I'm just gonna cast it. So I don't really know what's gonna count on that one. So. And then these ones just go in the same way. It reads them the same way. Again, you can't make mistakes on these because it won't let you. So that's what's nice about those ones. So.
We're running short of time.
Yep, so I'm pretty much done showing you that. But that's kind of our process as far as the test deck for the April election that the clerks are going through is 42 ballots. This was just a 10 ballot test that I had done.
So I showed you the 0 tape at the beginning, and what Kate did was she actually closed the polls. And you can see the tape process, the paper process, right? It shows right here at the very top, it will say total votes cast, 3. Right? We saw 3 ballots go in, 3 ballots were cast, and then it'll give you a tabulation of how all of those ballots were counted, so that towards the end, you actually get the total results tape. So what the election inspectors will then do after polls are closed, this tape gets printed, and then they actually fill out a tally sheet to say exactly that they're saying everything on the tape is what we're going to report on the tally sheet. They have to sign off not only on this tape, but also on the tally sheet before that information is ever even transmitted to the county clerk to be tabulated across all municipalities. So it's another safety feature. The other part I wanted to mention to you is that every time, I'm going to cut this off early, there is a registered write-in. All of those images are cast and collected and printed out on a tape so we can see exactly how many registered write-in candidates there were and how many people. This is where we always get like the Mickey Mouses and Donald Ducks, right? So the other part that it would behoove me to impress upon you is that if you do not feel like voting for a candidate, that is well within your right not to vote for that office. If you vote for Mickey Mouse, it takes a lot longer at the end of the night if Mickey Mouse is not a registered candidate. So letting the voters know that that is kind of a tedious process for the election inspectors. I think Cheryl from the town of Red Cedar, after one of the elections, there were 3 registered write-in candidates. The tape, I think she said was 47 feet long, right? So it just takes a lot of time. But again, it was one of the things, there were 3 registered write-in candidates. We checked all of them. We have the signature images cast for every single of those write-ins.
One thing about the tapes is the clerks, at the end of the night, they're pulling those ballots out. They're looking for those names. They're not taking them off the tape. The tape's just a guideline. You cannot take the names off the tape. You have to look at them on the actual ballots, just so that you know that they're reviewing the actual ballots for those write-ins.
So we are a little bit over time, and I know that League of Women Voters keeps things very timely. So are there any final questions here at the end that anybody wants to ask?
Did anyone fill out a card?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there was a question.
Here,
And
a couple
those
cards.
machines are not connected to the internet, correct?
Correct. These machines are not connected to the internet at any point in time. Yeah.
What is your security? You bring the machines in the night, the day before?
So all the municipal clerks, in Dunn County, all the municipal clerks are responsible for securing their machines. So for Kate, for example, she stores all the machines and all the election equipment in her vault. So she has it safely secured. She's the only one with access to that vault. The machines are also do annual maintenance every year. So every summer after the spring, or every spring after the spring election, Command Central comes in and they do maintenance on all the machines to make sure all the gears are working right, everything's, working up to snuff so that they're ready to go for the next election. Yep, but there's several security features that way too. And Kate showed this part, right? So to even be able to access anything within the tabulator in Dunn County, the chief inspectors are given this lanyard, and it's got the key and it's got the security features on the side. So only the chief inspectors can access the machine. So if there's a jam, only the chief inspectors can do that. If they have to pull out ballots because there's so many extra ballots that they have to start putting them aside, only the chief inspectors can do that. So there's several security steps. And then, of course, all of this information is returned to the county clerk the day after the election for safe and secure storage as well. But yeah, good questions. Any other final questions before we have to go?
Oh, we have some cards that were turned over to Mary and Donna.
No, I was just wondering. Can't read that.
We'll just
The first card that was handed to me, the last word I find hard to read. If you are a worker in the poll, when do you?
Vote.
When do you vote?
Where do you vote, yes.
When do you vote?
It's an excellent question. If you are scheduled for that 16-hour day on election day as a poll worker, first of all, you should ask your clerk if you can get a break. But usually, if you're allowed a lunch break, that's a perfect time to vote. The other thing that we usually encourage poll workers to do is to vote by absentee ballot, right? Because they might get so busy, well, especially on November 5th, we want it to be a nice, neutral session where everyone will feel comfortable. So that you know that your ballot will be returned to your
And
polling
those
location.
election inspectors are the point person at the polling place. They do have the right to remove people from the polling place if they are electioneering, they're, voicing their opinion about candidates, they're causing a ruckus, anything like that. The chiefs do have the authority to remove anybody from the polling place for being a little obnoxious.
Okay, this came up, you were talking about it, Andrew, but you didn't make it clear. Can a convicted felon vote in Wisconsin?
Only if that convicted felon has been offered a pardon by the government. Or the President of the United States. There's like a couple of different levels of that, right? So that's the only two caveats to that.
How do you know which ballot to give?
So in an April election,
I wrote that, and the reason is that I saw the Clare counties had back there, one of those, you had blue count, blue, red, yellow, green, what does all that mean?
The different ballot styles, different ballot styles, depending on, actually, I'll use April because we had like 117 different ballot styles. So here's an example of the file that we sent, the 126 different ballot styles based on where they live. Like we got some of them that are in certain school districts, and then the supervisory districts, as far as what supervisory district they're in.
So you actually have different ballots
Yes,
for, depending on
Yep,
where
like
they,
the,
their address is.
Like our township of Washington had, I think, 12 different ballot styles, because there's 7 supervisory districts and 6 different school districts, and so all those different combinations, so, yeah, it gets to be a lot. A lot of the ballots, like for the city of Eau Claire, because there's 20 polling places, I think at one polling place, the number of wards is there's 8 different wards, so we want 8 separate ballot styles, even though they might have the same thing on the ballot, just to keep the ward totals separate, so that, all of ballot style 3 is ward 3, that kind of thing, so just to keep the ballots unique to the ward number. But otherwise, out in the municipalities, it all depends on the combination of supervisory districts and school districts. And in this next upcoming August election, the only difference in the ballots in the whole county are assembly districts. We've got Assembly District 91, 92, and 93. So most of them are 91 or 93. That's the different ballot styles. So ballot style 1 is 91, 93 is ballot style 2, and then we've got a little bit the city of Eau Claire that's in Chippewa County that we program for. That's Assembly District 92.
And we're able to put a code in the poll book. We're able to change in the poll book to show next to the person's name what ballot style they get.
Yeah.
So the system tells us next to each voter what ballot style they should have, and we're able to put a color in there that matches the color of the ballot. So if you noticed in the example she brought up there of the ballot, it said 1 white, 2 blue. So what we're able to do in the poll book next to the people's name, it says white or blue, and which one they're supposed to get, to make it easier for the poll workers when they're trying to keep track of that many different ballot styles. It makes it easier for them to just take a look at that and then make sure that the person is getting the proper ballot. But of course, Andrew can talk about how efficient that the Badger books are in 91% of Dunn County.
I'm glad that message just stuck. Yes, so I think Sue was going to bring up a copy of a poll book where it shows you how you can color code them. And that's another safety feature, but for Badger books, for example, you are only getting a ticket and it will say blue Menominee School District, right? So you take that ticket and you turn it over to the election inspector who's going to hand you your ballot. They know to hand you the blue Menominee School District ballot.
Well,
So
like
you
right
see over
here, it
here.
says green,
Green,
white,
white,
green.
And so
blue,
those different
yep.
ballot styles, they usually have a color code at the top, like Sue showed that little blue box. In Dunn County, they have a strip that runs along the top as it does.
Yeah.
Good question.
there's a blue.
Yeah.
Okay, we really are at the end of our time, and I think that we might get kicked out of the building. I did suggest you might want to make a summary statement. Do you want to do that?
Get out and vote in August and November. Volunteer to be a poll worker, spread the message about how you came and watched these amazing people talk about the security of your elections and how knowledgeable they were. Definitely get that, that information out there.
Yes, and I just want to thank you all for coming today too. I think that's really important. You can help us spread the message that we run safe, secure elections here in Wisconsin. And if you have additional questions and you want to stay after and ask us anything, we will be happy to be here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters Greater Chippewa Valley for hosting this event. I think it's really great. Thank you for Mary from Springbrook, Shavana from Polk, and Sue from Eau Claire. Thank you all for being here.